Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 5 of Heavy Hitters, the review series for the SUVs and trucks of Gran Turismo 6. And in this episode we're featuring an SUV which is hardly used from what I can ascertain of public lobbies of racing, rallying, cruises, anything really. This car is very underappreciated by the majority of players. It is the Mitsubishi Pajero Super Evolution Rally Raid SUV. It's a Paris-Dakar style rally car, and it's one of the very few race spec SUVs on Gran Turismo. Really, there are only 2 racing spec SUVs on the game, and both of them are Mitsubishis. So what does this car have to offer? Because surely if people don't use it, that would indicate something about how good it is. Well, it's a pretty expensive car, and I think that's probably one of the things that puts many people off. It costs 450,000 credits. So it is one of the more expensive SUVs on the game. But what does it have to offer for that price? Well, fully tuned, it sits at 542 pp, which is probably lower than you might think from a racing SUV. And the horsepower, when fully tuned, is 584. So, a fair amount, but again, not as much as you might expect. As far as torque, it puts out 493 pound-feet. And another surprising thing about this SUV is it's actually nowhere near as light as you'd probably expect. Being a rally-based vehicle, you'd expect the weight to be relatively low to give it an advantage in racing and, well, rally-based racing. But it's actually not a lightweight truck at all. It weighs over 1,800 kilos stock, obviously stock being a relative term, and with the full weight loss package, it still weighs 1,478 kilos, which is pretty heavy even for an SUV. Many SUVs which are actually larger than this SUV are lighter than that, and they're not even racing or rally-based versions. Now, as far as power-to-weight ratio, it's not that amazing, which isn't surprising considering it doesn't have the most power of the SUVs in the game, and also doesn't have an amazing weight either. So the power-to-weight ratio is 395 horsepower per tonne. So overall, it's kind of an uninspiring vehicle, and that would explain why people don't really use it. But what does it have to offer for those who do choose to buy it in terms of actual usable performance? Well, it's certainly not a straight line machine, and that's not too surprising. Most rally vehicles aren't that great in a straight line, especially for top speed, and this is no exception. The top speed is around the 180-190 mile per hour region, so it's no way near the level of vehicles like the Range Stormer or Pikes Peak Quattro. It is, however, similar in performance to many other rally vehicles, which at the end of the day are the vehicles it's designed to go up against. In terms of acceleration, it's, again, okay. It's not class leading, but it is reasonably quick off the line for a vehicle of its size and weight. Now, speaking of size, it's actually not all that large by SUV standards. It's reasonably wide, but the wheelbase is quite short on this car. And although it's quite high off the ground, the body isn't all that large overall. And that does give you an advantage on certain tracks, especially tighter tracks where massive SUVs will be cumbersome and you have to really focus on just getting them around the corner rather than getting a quick lap. With this truck, or SUV, you can actually focus on getting that fast lap because of how compact and nimble it is. And the handling on it is actually very good. Probably not too surprisingly for a rally-based vehicle. The brakes are also very good on this car. Again, not surprisingly. And in many ways, it's kind of ironic, but this SUV is very similar to the Camaro that I reviewed in yesterday's video from the Pumping Iron series, in that it's nowhere near being the fastest in its class in a straight line. but around corners it is actually one of the best SUVs in the game. Now overall, I'd say you have to be very selective about when you choose to use this car, because like all vehicles, it has its purposes. No vehicle is completely useless. Everything is good for something. You just have to find out what it is. And in the case of this car, it's good at twisty tracks, rally tracks, obviously, but also twisty tarmac-based circuits. Now, it's pretty good here around Sierra, but not necessarily great, because at the end of the day, this is quite a high-speed track. So I think this car would really come into its own on tracks where the big SUVs don't get the chance to use all of their top-end power and performance. So for instance, tracks like Laguna Seca, or the Nürburgring perhaps, because the Nürburgring, although it's a high-speed track, requires more of a high average speed rather than an outright speed. Likewise with Laguna Seca, you need to get around the corners and the straights will take care of themselves. And in that regard, this is a very good SUV. The handling is very nimble. It's also very easy to drive. Many of the SUVs are quite slippery and heavy around corners. This one is very good. It handles, well, like a rally car, really, but the handling on the road is almost like a touring car, which is surprising for a vehicle of its size and weight. You really don't feel how heavy this vehicle is. It does feel, obviously, like an SUV, but it doesn't feel like a 1.4 or 1.5 tonne SUV. It feels around, I would say, probably 400 kilos lighter than it actually is, which is a good trait to have for a track car, especially on twisty tracks. So in terms of overall value for money, well, it's definitely not the best SUV in the game for value for money. It is very expensive for what you get from it. But it's different. It's a unique vehicle on the game. You hardly see anyone driving it, so you've got the obscurity and rarity factor. And it is a very good specialist vehicle, because on dirt tracks, as we've said in the Dirt Masters series, power doesn't mean that much if you can't actually handle, and this car handles very well. So on rally tracks, it's probably the best SUV in the game overall, and for twisty tracks, it's certainly one of the best. In terms of who I'd recommend it to, I would not recommend it to someone who's looking specifically to race SUVs, because there are faster ones for the money, or even for less money. But if you're already an owner of many SUVs and you're looking for something different, or a fan of rallying and you're looking for something different, then this is a very viable alternative to the more mainstream, widely used models. So that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.